NEP taking the center stage in learning throughout India, there are a lot of changes that we're seeing nowadays. From the rise of open learning to growing nationalism, there is a lot that's happening and we need to talk about it today. So let's get on with all of that with no further ado. Today I want to open up with this very interesting statistic that I came across. The NIOS, the National Institute of Open Learning, recently released their results for grade 10 and 12. And what we have noticed is that since 2022, they are significantly increasing. What could be the possible reasons, you may ask? Well, we can think of it in this sense. Firstly, digital resources that are available online can now be provided to different communities which may not have access to traditional learning sources, as well as they are providing flexible schedules, steady academic improvement, recognized credentials for even non-traditional learners so that they can complete their education successfully. They offer multiple exam sessions which are up to 9 attempts and on-demand exams as well. So with all of that into mind, open learning has been taking off quite a lot. And NEP in its structure supports it really well. And you will notice a lot of different ways that NEP is being implemented, particularly in these upcoming years. Maybe let's highlight a little bit today, where particularly within the university sectors, NEP is being the center focus of curricula, of programs, of whole degrees as well. So what is NEP trying to do currently? Many Indian universities have a few number of students, as few as 100. So NEP trying to push those reforms like flexible credit systems or internships is trying to garner more students into those universities so that these universities are able to provide these learners with upcoming information, knowledge and skills, as well as these learners getting the incentive to go to universities which are potentially closer to them, which are more accessible to them, and are less crowded. All of these provides the learner a very strong chance at growing their talents and making the most of what the system provides them. Students are bound to gain practical and career-friendly pathways. However, educators and universities are now under this pressure to modernize or risk being phased out. But it's a good thing in the long term. At the end of the day, education is for the learner and not for the institution. That is something that the NEP is trying to highlight extremely efficiently. Of course, teachers will need retraining and play a lot of advisory or mentorship roles beyond an academic setting for these learners to grow. What we need most within a transition like this is clear guidance at all sectors of the administration, as well as clear funding, which we need to see how it plays. At the end of the day, when it comes to budgeting within the education sector, a lot of different factors come into the picture. Of course, you have your economic development that is going to be highlighted pretty prominently within budget allotment. Of course, politics also matters. At the end of the day, what we can hope for is that our learners get the resources that they need to grow. That is what we all care for. Though a more interesting take that we are now seeing is this unsurety when it comes to CBSE's two-board system, two-exam policy, where grade 10 students are supposed to give their board exams, of course, in March, and if they require, if they want to, they can apply for improvement exams for up to 3 subjects in May. In theory, this kind of a system allows these learners a second chance to possibly eliminate those external factors that could potentially hinder exam performance. However, a lot of these changes come with a lot of logistical improvements and enhancements that need to be made, because schools may have to overhaul their calendars, academic calendars, and of course the logistics of what they provide at what time. Students and parents may feel increased stress, particularly on the parental side of things, due to these longer exam cycles, because of course, as every family likes to do, they like to go out on summer vacations, but if your child is giving an improvement exams, what summer vacation really exists? Apart from that, it definitely creates this pressure from say the start of June of the previous year till May of the year that you'll be giving your exam in. That is taxing. And of course, teachers who will be the ones actually teaching, conducting internal exams, invigilating, they will now be prone to burnout due to these increasing duties. So, how do we manage at a local level? The policies that are implemented at a higher level that sometimes are out of touch with the reality of today at the ground level. So, what do we do now at the local level? Of course, be specific with the teams that we create. So, the teams that are responsible for the teachers are themselves already overworked. We cannot afford that for our teachers. We need to reduce their workload. There are two ways of doing this. Either you completely modify their work in such a way that they can automate tasks that they really don't need to be putting their brains in, or you hire a larger, much more diverse workflow with different sets of skills. So what does that achieve? That achieves simplified workflows for each and every person that is employed within the workforce. And that could possibly improve on our systems that we employ at the local level itself. As I previously said, education is intermeshed with economics and politics. Now, economy is something that you could still predict while it being pretty unpredictable, not gonna lie. But economics is something that affects local bodies, where local educational bodies, even if the economics that we're dealing with is at a much larger scale. Politics, on the other hand, even local politics can change local educational bodies and how they work, as well as state or national levels. And when they clash, that's when the most amount of compromise happens at the educational front. And we see a lot of this with the recent news of Delhi University facing some backlash when it involved topics like jihad and Kashmir in its MA political science syllabus. And what's sad about it is that it is knowledge that is being censored. Of course, my aim for today is not to talk about the rights and the wrongs of what's being put out there in your syllabus. Topics which are, of course, extremely sensitive do need to be treaded with care. And especially in a political environment like we are in today, where things are unfolding even as we speak and have been doing so for the past 60, 70 years. It is unfortunate that this is what it comes down to. However, I feel like there are ways to deal with such things in a much more classy, in a much more concise, in a much more useful manner. Programs at the master's level aims to improve critical thinking, particularly in the humanities stream. So rather than excluding knowledge, creating a debate within these circles to provide an outcome that overall benefits the country is the right way to do this. Dialogue and debates are not to be weaponized and never should be weaponized. At the end of the day, it is the learners who are missing out on their development. Now, with such changes where revisions in this political science syllabus is expected, students may get a diluted version of what they're learning. Educators may have to self-censor due to this pressure that is put on them. And an idea of bias or this sense of suppression might be indicted, which is never a good environment for learning. I could only wish this entire situation to be taken care with ease and with enough integrity to protect the idea of education as a whole. But at the end of the day, I'm just a commenter in front of a camera. I am an educator in a place where this particular problem is not affected. Where I teach, of course, is an entirely different set of problems and an entirely different political landscape. But that will be a story for another day. However, the ground reality still does not change, be it where I am teaching versus where these changes are happening. Education should be first. Knowledge should be first. Skills should be first. As I said, I hope for the best for whatever comes out of this. And I'm sure that things will proceed in a manner that favors the people in those areas. In another set of confusing news, I would say Kerala has opted out of the PM Shri school scheme, where it declined 1,500 crore rupees in federal funds over concerns about centralization and the NEP's ideological tilt. Another case of political involvement into education. At the end of the day, schools are missing out on funds, federal funds, and these state-center disagreements can worry a lot of parents and teachers, particularly about the future of the kids. However, of course, the educators in Kerala retain their autonomy and are not pressurized by the center to implement changes that they may not want to. So it's this tight rope that people are walking on, where you either gain more autonomy and less funds from the center, or gain good amount of funds from the center but lose what you teach, how you teach. Of course, what I've said is a very dramatized version of what the reality is, but all of this just underscores the same fact that education needs to be prioritized and it cannot sway due to factors that are outside the learning sphere. In a similar change of tonality within the political sphere, where the IPC was renamed to the BNS and the President of India being called the President of Bharat by the Indian government, by the Bharatiya government, at Ambedkar University, over 50 courses were renamed to replace the word Indian with the word Bharatiya as part of a cultural reorientation. When it comes to matters like this, I am usually on the fence, because while these kind of changes are trying to highlight our history and our culture, the way that these get implemented leave a very sour taste in the mouth, where one ends up asking that question of how necessary was that change? Well, point blank, I must say that this is a change that I do not go against. Well, of course, we should embrace our culture. We should be called Bharatiya. We should use Bharat. Sure. What is the precedent for these changes to be implemented? And what does it imply for what's to come ahead? These are two unanswered questions. And without that context, these changes seem pretty bleak. And I hope to get more of an idea on what these kind of changes really mean to the world. And a lot of people, when seeing such changes happen, who may not align with what's happening and what they're seeing, turn to open schooling for the amount of flexibility that they have. As I mentioned at the start, NIOS has been doing pretty good. I'll come to numbers in a bit. But open schooling as a whole, let me explain that first. Open schooling refers to a flexible learner-driven model of education where learners study at their own pace, often from home, and can appear for exams conducted by recognized boards. It is pretty ideal for students who pursue sports, art, or other demanding careers, who face challenges in traditional schooling or who want alternate paths to education, where they are able to hold their autonomy of learning. Now, as I talked about NIOS at the start, it is the largest open schooling system in the world with over 2.5 million learners in NIOS courses, which include a lot of vocational and academic subjects. Students can choose their choices of subjects, and exams can be given twice a year with up to 9 attempts that are spread over 5 years. NIOS is also recognized by the Ministry of Education, and its certificates are accepted by colleges, universities, and competitive exams. And post-COVID, open schooling has seen a surge in popularity. Of course, people, when they were locked at their home, were forced to learn online. However, some people made a good amount of success from it. It definitely offers a lower sense of stress, especially for children with learning differences and difficulties or unconventional talents. A custom pace, where, of course, the learner is learning at their own pace, can help with deeper understanding. And for children who are putting in their time and effort strongly into other careers like sports, performing arts, or even startups, this allows them to have parallel career building and are pretty affordable as well. Now, coming to performance. From 2022 to 2025, grade 10 has seen a good amount of increase from around 50.53% to around 62.72%, whereas class 12 has seen going from 52.23 to 68.34, even though there was a considerable spike down at 34.42% in April 2023. But looking at the trend that we have currently in 2025, the trend is definitely looking positive. And this means that things will grow further and further, and students who go through open schooling will be able to compete at the same stage as students who go to public and private schools as well. What should parents consider? Of course, the flexibility, the academic improvement, the credentials, and access to digital support. Definitely. As time passes, I'm expecting to see performance increasing, even though it's still trailing behind regular boards and requires a very strong and supported learning environment at home or wherever the learner is learning. So these are things that parents definitely need to consider. But overall, open learning has been a strong and a pretty powerful idea for making learning more inclusive and accessible to everyone. With all the changes that are happening around in the world, it is the most important thing for you as a learner and you as a parent to consider what is the best for you. My job to showcase all of these different news articles and give my little opinion on that was to just give you an idea of what is the current circumstances that are present in the educational sphere in India. What your takeaway should be from here is how you navigate through this. My learners, I always empower them to make their own decisions with their ideal goal in mind. And that is what I will encourage all of you to do. Your learning always supersedes everything else that happens in this educational sphere that you're living in. Always keep that in mind. With this, I will see you the next time. Thank you and happy learning.